The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was a place that made visitors feel small. Its walls were made of crystal that came from 100 different worlds, and the ceiling was so high that it seemed to touch the stars themselves. 73 species from across the galaxy had their representatives here, sitting in chairs that floated in the air, each one designed for their particular body type. Claire Hamilton stood at the human podium with her small team behind her. She wore a simple blue suit, nothing fancy because humans had been told to keep things modest for their first official petition. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her face calm and professional. Behind her stood Peter Lawson, her assistant, along with Danny Wright, their military advisor, and 2 other diplomats whose job was mostly to take notes and look official. The chamber was filled with sounds that no human ear was used to. There were clicks and whistles, deep rumbling sounds and high-pitched tones that hurt to hear. But underneath all of it, Claire could hear something else. Laughter. They were laughing at her. A creature that looked like a giant insect stepped forward from his floating chair. His name was Kizat, and he was from a species called the Vrexians. His body was covered in green armor plates, and he had 4 arms that moved in ways that made Claire uncomfortable to watch. When he spoke, his mouth parts clicked together in a way that the translation device turned into words. "So the humans want a seat on the Security Council," Kizat said, and his tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. "How very bold of you. Tell me, Ambassador Hamilton, what exactly makes you think your species deserves such an honor?" Claire had practiced her speech 100 times. She knew every word, every pause, every gesture. The human race brings new ideas and fresh perspectives to the Council. "We have achieved faster than light travel. We have established colonies on 6 different worlds, and we have much to offer in terms of—" "You have nothing," said another voice, and this one was so deep that Claire felt it in her chest. Councillor Thane was a massive creature from a species called the Korthan. He looked almost like a bear that had decided to stand on 2 legs and grow to 3 times the normal size. His 3 eyes, arranged in a triangle on his face, stared down at Claire with obvious contempt. "Your species has been in space for less than 200 years. Some of us here were building structures around stars when your ancestors were living in caves and hitting each other with rocks." The laughter grew louder. A snake-like creature that was all scales and too many teeth hissed its approval. A being made entirely of living crystal chimed in with sounds like breaking glass, which apparently meant it found this hilarious. Claire felt Peter tense up behind her. She knew he wanted to say something, probably something angry, but that would make things worse. She took a breath and tried again. "We understand that we are new to the galactic community. That is exactly why we can offer something different. We can see problems with fresh eyes and—" "Problems?" Kazat's laughter sounded like someone shaking a box full of rocks. "The only problem here is that you people think you matter. You have 1 solar system, 1 tiny little star with a handful of planets that nobody else wanted. You have no military power, no economic strength, and nothing that anyone in this chamber needs from you." Thane stood up from his chair, which made him look even more enormous. The hall got quiet because when Thane spoke, people listened. "Let me make this very simple for you, human. This council has been running the galaxy for over 50,000 years. We have rules. We have traditions. We have a way of doing things. You cannot simply walk in here and demand to be treated as an equal when you have done nothing to earn it." "We have earned it," Claire said, and she heard her own voice getting harder. "Humanity has survived wars, plagues, natural disasters, and our own worst impulses. We have built a civilization that values cooperation and progress. We have reached for the stars not because it was easy, but because we refuse to stay small. If that is not worthy of respect, then I do not know what is." The chamber erupted with noise again. Some of it was laughter. Some of it was angry chittering and growling. A few representatives were arguing with each other, probably about whether to throw the humans out immediately or let them finish embarrassing themselves first. Kazat held up one of his 4 hands for silence. "Very inspiring words, Ambassador. But words are cheap. Actions matter. Results matter. Territory matters. Power matters. And you have none of these things." He looked around at the other representatives. "I move that we vote on the human petition immediately. All in favor of granting humans a seat on the Security Council. Indicate now." The voting system was simple. Each representative's chair would glow either green for yes or red for no. Claire watched as the chairs lit up one by one. Red, red, red. 73 red lights, 1 for each member of the council. Not a single green light appeared. Not one. The motion fails, Kazat announced, barely hiding his amusement. Perhaps in 10,000 years, when you have actually accomplished something meaningful, we will reconsider your request. Until then, I suggest you return to your little world and stop wasting the time of people who have actual important work to do. Danny Wright whispered urgently to Claire, "We should leave. There is nothing more we can do here." But Claire stood still for a moment longer, looking around at all the faces and forms in the chamber. Some looked bored. Some looked amused. A few actually seemed sorry for her, which somehow felt worse than the mockery. She memorized the feeling, let it sink deep into her bones. This was not something humanity would forget. "Thank you for your time," she said, keeping her voice level. "We will remember your decision." As the human delegation walked out of the chamber, they could still hear the sounds behind them. More laughter. More comments about primitive species who did not know their place. Someone made a joke about humans and monkeys that got a big laugh. Claire kept walking, her back straight and her head high. When they were finally in the hallway outside, Peter pulled out a small device from his pocket. It looked like an ordinary phone, but it was connected to a very secure network that only a few people in the human government had access to. His fingers moved across the screen, typing out a short message. "What are you doing?" asked Danny. "Sending a message home," Peter said quietly. A very specific message to some very specific people. Claire watched him type and allowed herself a small smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that said someone had made a very big mistake and was about to learn a hard lesson. The message was only 5 words long, but those 5 words were going to change everything. Peter hit send and put the device away. Diplomacy failed. Execute Protocol 7. Back in the council chamber, the representatives were already moving on to other business. Some trade dispute between 2 minor species. Standard procedure. Another boring day of politics and power games. None of them noticed the small human ship that had been waiting in orbit around their station. None of them saw it turn and jump into faster-than-light travel, heading back to human space. And absolutely none of them knew what Protocol 7 meant. But they were going to find out soon enough. Because while humanity had come to the council hoping for peace and cooperation, they had not come unprepared for rejection. They had spent 200 years learning how the galaxy worked. They had studied every species, every power structure, every weakness and strength. The Galactic Council had just made the biggest mistake in their 50,000-year history. They had assumed that being old made them wise. They had assumed that being powerful made them safe. They had assumed that humanity would simply accept being told no. They were wrong on all counts. Somewhere far away, in the darkness beyond the orbit of Neptune, 48 massive warships received the message at the same time. Lights that had been dark for months suddenly came on. Crews that had been waiting in cold sleep began to wake up. Weapon systems that had never been fired outside of tests started running through their activation sequences. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the largest ship, reading the message that had just arrived. He had expected this outcome. Part of him had even hoped for it, though he would never admit that out loud. Humanity had tried the peaceful route. Now it was time to try something else. "All ships, this is Morrison," he said into the fleet communication system. "Prepare for Operation Thunderclap. We are going to teach the galaxy a lesson about underestimating Earth." 3 weeks passed after the Council rejected humanity's petition. 3 weeks of silence from Earth. 3 weeks during which the representatives of 73 civilizations went back to their normal routines, already forgetting about the small delegation that had dared to ask for respect. Then the transmission came. It appeared on every screen in the Council headquarters at the same time. Emergency override protocols kicked in, which should have been impossible for anyone outside the Council's own security network. Every representative, from the lowest clerk to the highest counselor, found themselves looking at the same image. A human man in a dark blue military uniform stood in front of what was clearly a spacecraft bridge. The uniform was crisp and clean, with symbols and medals that meant nothing to the council members watching. Behind him, other humans moved around, checking displays and controls. The man's face was calm, but his eyes were hard and cold. "Members of the Galactic Council," he began. "My name is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Command. 3 weeks ago, you rejected our petition for representation. You laughed at our ambassador. You called us children who should know our place. You told us to come back in 10,000 years when we had accomplished something. In the council chamber, Kizat was already chittering angrily at his assistants. How did they break into our communication network? This should be impossible. On the screen, Morrison continued, I am here to inform you that you have 72 hours to hold another vote on humanity's petition. This time you will approve it with full Security Council privileges and all the rights that come with that position. Thane's deep laugh echoed through the chamber. Or what, human? Will you throw a tantrum? What could you possibly do that would concern this council? Morrison's expression did not change. I am not making threats, Counselor Thane. I am simply informing you of the situation. You have 72 hours. After that time, if the vote has not been held and passed, there will be consequences. The coordinates for transmitting your decision will be sent to your diplomatic channels within the hour. I suggest you use them. The screen went black. For several seconds, nobody in the council chamber said anything. Then the room exploded with noise. Representatives were shouting at each other, demanding explanations, calling for security checks. Xat was clicking his mandibles so fast it sounded like a machine gun. The snake beings were hissing in agitation. Even the normally calm crystal people were chiming in distress. This is absurd, declared a representative from a species that looked like walking plants. They have no military, no weapons capable of threatening even our smallest outposts. This is clearly a desperate bluff. Thane called for order, his massive voice cutting through the chaos. Agreed. The humans are embarrassed and angry, so they are making empty threats. However, we cannot let such disrespect go unanswered. I propose we send a small fleet to their home system. Nothing aggressive, merely a show of force to remind them of their place in the galaxy. The vote passed with only 3 representatives abstaining. 12 ships, a standard patrol force, would travel to human space and make it clear that threatening the Council was not acceptable. What the Council did not know was that when humanity had first made contact with the galaxy 6 years ago, they had been very careful about what information they shared. They had shown off their scientific achievements. They had presented their art and culture. They had demonstrated their civilian spacecraft and talked about their colonies. They had acted like peaceful explorers who just wanted to be friends with everyone. They had not mentioned the military fleet they had spent 80 years building in secret. Out past Neptune, in the cold darkness where no one ever looked, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched the data come in. The ship around him was 3 kilometers long, covered in black armor that seemed to swallow light. Around his flagship, 47 other ships of similar size hung in space like sleeping giants. Admiral, said Lieutenant Sophie Green, looking up from her console, the Council has dispatched 12 ships to our system. Standard patrol configuration. They will arrive in approximately 60 hours. Morrison nodded slowly. Good, let them come. Make sure they get a very good look at the Retribution before we leave. I want them to see exactly what they are dealing with. And if they still do not back down, sir, then we move to Phase 2. Morrison turned to address his bridge crew. Navigation, plot a course for Vrex Prime. That is the Council's headquarters world. Tactical, I want all weapon systems checked and rechecked. Communications, prepare the final warning for transmission. A younger officer named Kyle Banner spoke up hesitantly. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. Are we really going to start a war? They have 73 different civilizations. Even if our ships are better, we are heavily outnumbered. Morrison walked over to stand in front of Banner. Do you know why Earth decided to build these ships, Commander? It was not because we wanted war. It was because we looked at the galaxy and realized something important. Every single civilization out there is thousands of years old. They have been powerful for so long that they have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. They think being old makes them wise. They think having lots of ships makes them strong. He gestured to the view screen showing the stars. But we are human. We have been at war with someone or something for our entire history. We know how to fight when we are outnumbered. We know how to win when everyone says we cannot. And most importantly, we know the difference between showing strength and being cruel. Morrison turned back to face the entire bridge crew. What we are going to do is simple. We are going to park the biggest, meanest warship they have ever seen, right over their most important planet. We are going to make it absolutely clear that we could hurt them badly if we wanted to. And then we are going to give them a choice. Treat us as equals or find out what happens when you push humanity too far. Sophie Green looked concerned. But sir, what if they call our bluff? It is not a bluff, Lieutenant. We will do exactly what I said. But here's the thing, the part they do not understand yet. We do not want to hurt anyone. We just want respect. If they give us that, everyone walks away happy. If they do not, Morrison paused. Well, humanity has a saying. It is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. We came to them as gardeners. They treated us like weeds. Now they get to meet the warriors. The hours ticked by. The Council's patrol fleet arrived in human space and immediately sent back frantic reports. There were warships. Massive warships. Dozens of them. Ship designs that did not match anything in the Council's databases. Weapon signatures that their sensors could barely read. The humans had not been helpless explorers at all. They had teeth, and those teeth were very, very sharp. Back at the Council headquarters, panic was starting to set in. Intelligence officers were pulling up every bit of data they had on humanity, trying to figure out how they had missed this. The answer was simple and embarrassing. The humans had only shown them what they wanted them to see. Nobody had thought to look deeper because nobody had considered the peaceful humans to be a threat. How is this possible? Xat demanded, staring at the images being transmitted from the patrol fleet. Where did they get the resources? The technology? The time to build all of this? A luminary intelligence officer chimed softly. They have been in space for 200 years, Counselor. We assumed they were building colonies and research stations. It appears they were building something else as well. Thane looked at the estimated specifications for the human warships and felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. Fear. These ships are more advanced than ours. Their shields, their weapons, their speed. We have nothing that matches these capabilities. They are bluffing, Kazat insisted, but his voice lacked confidence. They would not actually attack us. It would be suicide, would it? Asked the luminary officer. Their ships are superior to ours individually. If they strike quickly at key locations, they could cripple our ability to respond before we could organize a proper defense. And look at the design. These are not exploration vessels. These are warships, purpose-built for combat. The humans have been preparing for this since they first reached the stars. As the 72-hour deadline approached, the Council was in chaos. Some members wanted to call the human bluff. Others wanted to negotiate. A few actually suggested that maybe humanity had earned their seat through this demonstration of capability. Though they were shouted down by the more traditional members, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution and checked the countdown. 2 minutes remained. Around him, his crew was silent and focused. Every system on the ship was ready. Every weapon was charged. Every shield was at maximum power. Sir, Sophie Green said quietly. No response from the Council. Morrison nodded. He had expected this. Pride was a powerful thing, and the Council had a lot of pride to lose. Then we moved to Phase 2. All ships prepare for jump to light speed. Destination Vrex Prime, it is time to make our point clearly. The Retribution's engines began to hum with power. Around it, 47 other ships did the same. The space around Neptune lit up with energy as the fleet prepared to jump. Kyle Banner looked at Vrex Prime was beautiful in the way that only ancient worlds could be. It orbited 2 stars that danced around each other, and 3 perfect moons hung in its sky like jewels. The Vrexians had been shaping this world for over 20,000 years, and it showed. Massive cities covered the continents, connected by transport systems that moved millions of people every hour. In orbit, stations the size of Earth's moon processed trade from 100 different systems. This was the heart of the Galactic Council, the most protected, most secure location in known space. Over 200 warships patrolled the system at all times. Defense platforms ringed the planet, each one powerful enough to destroy a fleet. Nothing had threatened Vrex Prime in over 6,000 years. That was about to change. Space twisted and tore open directly above the planet's north pole. Energy readings spiked so high that sensors broke trying to measure them. And then the Retribution emerged from faster-than-light travel, hanging in the sky like a blade held over the throat of civilization. The ship was enormous. Its black hull seemed to absorb the light from the twin suns, making it look like a hole in space shaped like a weapon. Every line of its design spoke of one purpose: war. This was not a ship built for exploration or trade or diplomacy. This was a ship built to win fights. On the surface, alarms started screaming in every military installation on the planet. In the Council headquarters, representatives were running to their emergency stations, or just standing and staring at the displays in shock. In orbit, the defense fleet was scrambling to respond. "Unknown vessel, this is Vrex Prime Defense Command," came the transmission. The voice sounded scared despite trying to stay professional. "You have entered restricted space without authorization. Identify yourself immediately or you will be destroyed." On the Retribution's bridge, Morrison stood calmly. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. This was the moment they had trained for. The moment that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. "Open a channel," Morrison said. "Full broadcast. I want everyone in this system to hear this." Sophie Green worked her console. "Channel open, sir. Every ship, every station, every communication device in the system is receiving." Morrison took a breath and began to speak. His voice was calm and clear, showing no fear or anger. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Command, commanding the Battleship Retribution. 72 hours ago, I gave the Galactic Council an ultimatum. That time has expired. You chose not to respond. You chose instead to send a patrol to intimidate us. That was a mistake." In the council chamber far below, chaos had erupted. Kazat was shouting orders into multiple communication devices at once. Thane had gone pale, all three of his eyes fixed on the screen showing the massive human ship. Other representatives were demanding explanations, calling for security, or simply sitting in stunned silence. "That ship cannot be real," someone whispered. "Nothing that big could actually function." "It is there," Thane said heavily. "The sensors do not lie. The humans have brought a weapon to our doorstep." Morrison continued his broadcast. "I came here to make something very clear. Humanity asked to join your council peacefully. We were honest in our intentions. We wanted cooperation and friendship. You responded with mockery and dismissal. You judged us without knowing us. You decided we were not worth your respect." The defense platforms around the planet were powering up. Energy readings showed weapons charging. The orbital fleet was moving into attack position. Over 300 weapon systems were now aimed at the Retribution. Kyle Banner called out from his station. "Admiral, they are preparing to fire. Massive energy buildup across all defense platforms. Shields to maximum," Morrison ordered. "But do not return fire, not yet. Let them see what they are dealing with. Sir, they are firing." The space around Rex Prime lit up like a small star being born. Particle beams, plasma cannons, kinetic missiles, and energy weapons that humanity did not even have names for, yet all converged on the Retribution. It was enough firepower to destroy a moon, enough to crack a planet's crust, enough to turn any normal ship into vapor. The Retribution's shields flared brilliant blue as they absorbed the impact. The ship shook slightly, enough that the crew had to brace themselves, but the shields held. The barrage continued for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Every weapon the Vrexians had was firing at full power. Then the firing stopped. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The defense platforms needed to recharge, and the Retribution was still there, hanging in space, completely intact. Sophie Green checked her displays. "Shield strength at 91%, Admiral. Their weapons are powerful, but not enough to overcome our defensive systems." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "Tactical target defense platforms 7, 19, and 34. Disable only. I want them offline, but I do not want casualties if we can avoid them." "Targeting solutions locked, sir. Firing." The Retribution's main railguns fired 3 times. The shots were precise, surgical. Each one struck the shield generator of a defense platform. The platforms did not explode. Instead, they simply went dark as their power systems overloaded and shut down automatically to prevent damage. Every other defense platform immediately stopped charging their weapons. The message was clear. The humans could have destroyed them, but chose not to. They were showing restraint. But they were also showing capability. "Admiral," Sophie Green said. "Incoming transmission from the Council." "It is Councillor Thane." "Put him through." The massive Corthan appeared on the screen. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect mixed with fear. "Admiral Morrison, please. We should talk about this." "There is no need for violence." "I agree completely," Morrison replied. "There was no need for violence. There was no need for mockery. There was no need for any of this. But you chose your path, Counselor. I am simply following it to its conclusion. What do you want?" "The same thing we wanted 3 weeks ago. A seat on the Security Council. Full voting rights, equal treatment and respect. That is all we have ever wanted." Thane was silent for a moment. Morrison could almost see the calculations happening behind those three eyes. The council must vote. We cannot simply grant such a thing without proper procedure. You have 6 hours, Morrison interrupted. Call an emergency session. Get every member together. Hold the vote. And Councillor Thane, I need you to understand something very clearly. He leaned forward slightly. This ship, the Retribution, is one of 48 identical vessels. Each one is currently positioned near a council member's homeworld or primary colony. Each one is ready to do exactly what I am doing right now. If you think I am bluffing, test me. If you think you can destroy all of us, try it. But remember that you could not even damage one ship's shield significantly. Morrison's voice grew harder. Humanity came to the stars looking for friends. We would have been loyal allies and trusted partners. We would have contributed to the council and supported its goals. You decided we were not good enough. You laughed at us. Now you get one more choice. Treat us as equals or learn what happens when you make an enemy of Earth. The transmission ended before Thane could respond. In the council chamber, silence had fallen. Representatives stared at each other, at the screens showing the human battleship, at the data streaming in about 47 more ships positioned throughout council space. The galaxy's balance of power had just shifted and everyone knew it. Xat's mandibles were trembling. How did we not see this coming? How did they hide an entire war fleet from us? A voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. Lady Ellen Frost, who had been part of the human delegation 3 weeks ago, stepped forward. She had stayed on Vrex Prime as part of a secondary diplomatic team, mostly just observing and taking notes. Now she walked to the center of the chamber carrying a data tablet. Because you never asked, she said simply. You asked about our science and our culture. You asked about our civilian ships and our colonies. You never asked if we had weapons. You never asked if we could defend ourselves. You assumed we were weak because we chose to present ourselves peacefully. She activated the tablet and images appeared on every screen in the chamber. Human warships under construction, weapons tests, shield demonstrations, file after file of military data that made it clear just how prepared humanity had been for this possibility. We have been building these fleets for 80 years, Ellen continued. Since the day we developed faster than light travel, we knew the galaxy would not be safe. We knew we would need protection, but we hoped, genuinely hoped, that we would not need to use them. We came here wanting peace. She looked around at the assembled representatives, meeting eyes and optical sensors and whatever else each species used to see. You could have had humanity as the most dedicated ally you ever knew. We would have fought for this council. We would have defended its values. We would have been partners in building a better galaxy. Instead, you laughed at us. You told us we were not worthy. You made this necessary. A Luminary representative chimed softly. What happens now? If we vote no again, will you attack us? Ellen shook her head. We are not here to conquer. We are here to be heard. Admiral Morrison will not fire on civilian targets, but he will demonstrate very clearly and very... The next 6 hours were the longest in the history of the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions were called on 73 different worlds. Leaders who had not met in person for decades suddenly found themselves in urgent video conferences. Military commanders were pulled from their duties to assess the situation. Intelligence agencies worked frantically to verify every piece of information about human military capabilities. Everything checked out. Every terrifying detail was real. The humans had 48 battleships, each one powerful enough to fight an entire fleet. Their weapons technology combined ideas from dozens of different extinct civilizations, species that humanity had apparently studied extensively through archaeological research. Their shields used some kind of harmonic frequency system that made most normal weapons much less effective, and perhaps most frightening, the humans themselves seemed calm and focused under pressure. Not panicked or aggressive, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution, receiving status reports from the other human warships scattered across Council space. Each ship was in position near a different homeworld, visible but not threatening, waiting like chess pieces ready to move. Retribution, this is vengeance, came the voice of Admiral Lisa Harper. Her ship was positioned near the Yesrath homeworld. The Snake people are nervous. Their fleet is moving into defensive positions, but they are not charging weapons. I think they are waiting to see what the Council decides. Same situation here, reported Captain Ryan Cole from the UES Justice near Corthan Space. Thane's people have mobilized their entire defense force, but they are holding position. No aggressive moves, Morrison nodded. Good. Maintain current positions. Do not fire unless fired upon. And if anyone does fire, disable only. No casualties if we can avoid them. Sophie Green looked up from her console. Admiral, 3 hours and 15 minutes remaining on the deadline. Kyle Banner turned from his tactical station. Sir, I need to ask something. If they refuse the vote, are we really prepared to attack? These are civilian populations. That goes against everything humanity stands for. Morrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. No, Commander. We will not attack civilians. That is not who we are, and it never will be. But here is what the Council does not understand. We do not need to. He gestured to the view screen showing Vrex Prime below. These civilizations are old. They have been powerful for so long that they have forgotten what real conflict looks like. Their societies are soft, comfortable. They have not had to fight for survival in thousands of years. The threat of violence is almost worse than actual violence to them, because they have no experience with it anymore. Morrison continued, If they refuse, we will target military installations only. Command centers, defense platforms, warship construction facilities. We will cripple their ability to wage war while killing as few people as possible. And then we will broadcast to every citizen in Council space exactly what happened and why. We will tell them that their leaders chose pride over peace, that they refused to treat another species fairly. You think their own people will turn against them? Sophie asked. I know they will. We have been studying these civilizations for 6 years. We know about the discontent in the outer colonies. We know about the species that feel underrepresented in the Council. We know about all the little fractures that exist beneath the surface. If we show that the Council's leadership is willing to risk war, rather than admit they were wrong, those fractures will become breaks. In the Council chamber, the debate continued. Representatives argued back and forth, voices raised, tempers flaring. Some wanted to fight, to show humanity that the Council could not be threatened. Others wanted to negotiate to find some middle ground. And a few were starting to say what needed to be said but what nobody wanted to hear. The Luminari representative, a being of living crystal named Lightweaver Sin, spoke in soft chimes that the translators turned into words. Perhaps we should consider what humanity has actually accomplished. They reached space later than most of us, yes, but they did so knowing the galaxy was already claimed and colonized. They did so understanding they would be outsiders, and yet they prepared for every possibility. Sin's crystalline form caught the light, sending rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. This shows remarkable strategic thinking. They are patient. They are thorough. They plan for the long term. These are qualities we claim to value in Council members. Perhaps we made an error in judgment. Kuzat clicked his mandibles angrily. They threatened us. They brought weapons here. They are trying to force us to give them what they want through intimidation. After we refused them through mockery, Sin replied calmly, Let me ask everyone here a question. What would your own species have done in humanity's position? If you had been dismissed and laughed at, if you had been told you were not worthy of respect, would you have accepted that quietly? The chamber fell silent, because the answer for most species represented there was no. They would have responded with force or threats or some kind of retaliation. The humans were not doing anything that others would not have done. The only difference was that the humans had the capability to back up their demands. Councillor Thane stood slowly, his massive form drawing every eye in the chamber. My people have a saying, the warrior who seeks peace but prepares for war is wise. The fool who seeks war but prepares for peace is dead. It seems humanity is not foolish. He looked around at the other representatives. I do not like being threatened. None of us do. But let us be honest with ourselves. Are the humans asking for something unreasonable? They want a seat on the Council. They want voting rights. They want to be treated as equals. Is that really so much to ask? They have not earned it, protested a representative from a species that looked like walking plants, have they not? Thane challenged. They built a war fleet that rivals anything we have. They developed technology we do not fully understand. They executed a strategic operation that placed forces throughout our territory, without us even knowing until it was too late. That shows capability. That shows power. And whether we like it or not, power has always been the currency of the Council. Another representative spoke up. If we give in to threats, we set a dangerous precedent. Anyone with weapons could demand representation. Anyone with weapons and the willingness to use them already has representation, Thane said. That is how most of us gained our seats. Through strength, through proving we could not be ignored. The humans are doing exactly what many of us did thousands of years ago. The only reason we are uncomfortable is because they are doing it to us instead of to someone else. The debate continued, but something had shifted. More representatives were starting to see the situation clearly. The humans were not asking for dominance. They were asking for equality. The fact that they had to threaten violence to get it said more about the council than it did about humanity. With 1 hour remaining on Morrison's deadline, Councillor Thane called for a vote. Not on whether to accept humanity, but on whether to even hold another vote on the matter. It passed narrowly. Then came the actual vote that mattered. The chamber was silent as each representative made their choice. Green lights for yes. Red lights for no. One by one, the chairs began to glow. The first few were red, representatives who could not bring themselves to reward what they saw as aggression. But then green lights started appearing, more and more of them. The final count appeared on the central display. 68 yes, 4 no. 1 abstention. Humanity's petition for full Security Council membership had passed. Lady Ellen Frost stood at the human podium, keeping her face carefully neutral, even though she wanted to cheer. She pulled out a secure communication device and typed a short message to Admiral Morrison. Stand down. We are in. On the Retribution's bridge, Morrison read the message and felt tension he had not realized he was carrying drain out of his shoulders. All ships, this is Morrison. Mission accomplished. Power down weapons systems. Return to yellow alert status. Prepare for diplomatic operations. He turned to his crew, and for the first time since the operation began, he smiled fully. Well done, everyone. We just changed the galaxy. Sophie Green was grinning. Sir, did you ever doubt they would accept? Morrison considered the question honestly. Doubt, yes, always. There was a real chance they would choose to fight rather than compromise. But I believed we were right. I believed that if we stood firm and showed them we were serious, they would see reason. Sometimes all it takes to change things is someone willing to stand up and say that the old way of doing things is not good enough anymore. Kyle Banner looked relieved. What happens now, Admiral? Now comes the hard part, Morrison said. We proved we could make them listen. Next, we have to prove we deserve the seat we demanded. We have to show the Council that humanity is not just strong, but wise. That we are not just capable of war, but capable of building peace. That is going to take a lot more work than parking a battleship in their sky. In the Council chamber, the representatives were slowly coming to terms with what had just happened. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. A new player had entered the game, and they had done it by breaking all the rules that everyone else had been following. 6 months had passed since the Retribution arrived at Vrex Prime, and the galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. The human battleship remained in orbit, no longer a threat but a permanent fixture, a symbol that things had changed and would never go back to how they were. Admiral Morrison had been given a new title, High Ambassador. He served as both military liaison and diplomatic representative, splitting his time between the Retribution's bridge and the Council chambers below. But he had made one thing very clear from his first day in the position. Humanity was not here to conquer or dominate. They were here to fix problems. This mining dispute between the Ice Wrath and the Corthan has been going on for 200 years, Morrison said during a Security Council session. He stood at the human podium, which had been moved to the center of the council table equal to all others. Around him sat representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, watching him with expressions that ranged from respect to suspicion. 200 years of arguing over who gets to mine an asteroid field. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? Councillor Thane rumbled uncomfortably. The situation is complicated. There are historical claims, territorial boundaries, economic considerations. There are 2 groups of people who both want the same rocks, Morrison interrupted. Here is what is going to happen. The Yisrath get mining rights on odd-numbered years. The Corthan get even-numbered years. Both sides will contribute to building a joint research station to study the minerals, and all findings get shared equally. Any future disputes get arbitrated by a neutral party, and Earth volunteers for that job. Kazat clicked his mandibles in what Morrison had learned was amusement. And if we refuse this suggestion, Admiral? Morrison smiled, but it was not a particularly friendly smile. Then you continue wasting time and resources on a pointless territorial dispute for another 200 years, while your citizens wonder why their leaders cannot accomplish basic problem solving. Your choice, Counselor. The motion passed. 16 votes in favor, 3 against. It was the first of many such resolutions. With humanity holding a critical vote on the Security Council, deadlocks that had existed for centuries were suddenly breaking open. Morrison's approach was simple and direct. Find solutions that worked for everyone, ignore the politics and hurt pride, and shame anyone who put their ego ahead of practical results. Back on Earth, in the new Galactic Embassy building in Geneva, Ambassador Claire Hamilton was handling the civilian side of humanity's new role. She sat in her office overlooking Lake Geneva, talking to a reporter from the largest human news network. Admiral Morrison gets most of the attention, Claire said, but the real work happens here on Earth and in embassies across the galaxy. We have opened trade negotiations with 47 different species. We have started cultural exchange programs. We are working on creating universal standards for space traffic control, environmental protection of colonized worlds, and fair resource distribution. The reporter leaned forward. Ambassador Hamilton, some people say that humanity essentially forced its way into the galactic community through threats and intimidation. How do you respond to those who call us bullies? Claire's expression grew serious. We asked politely first. We were laughed at. We demonstrated our capability and suddenly we became worth listening to. What does that tell you about the system we entered? We did not want to use force. But we learned a long time ago in human history that being right is not enough. You have to be strong enough to make people respect that you are right. So you believe the ends justified the means? I believe that sometimes change requires discomfort, Claire replied carefully. The galaxy had settled into patterns that were not working for everyone. Smaller species had no voice. Disputes went unsolved because no one wanted to compromise. Innovation had slowed because the old powers were comfortable. We disrupted that. Yes, we used force to do it, but now we are using that position to actually make things better. Another reporter asked, what is humanity's long-term goal in the Council? To do what we have always done best, Claire said. Solve problems. Most of these alien civilizations are thousands of years old. They have forgotten what it is like to struggle, to adapt, to face challenges with fresh thinking. Humanity is young. We still remember how to fight for survival. That gives us a perspective they lack. We see solutions where they see traditions. We see opportunities where they see rules that cannot be broken. On the outer edges of Rexian space, something interesting was happening. Smaller species that had been part of the Council for centuries but had always been ignored were starting to speak up. Inspired by humanity's bold challenge to the established order, they were demanding reforms, better representation, and fairer treatment. And humanity was supporting them every step of the way. Captain Ryan Cole found himself in an unexpected position. The UES Justice was now part of a joint patrol fleet, working alongside Corthan warships to protect the frontier. A group of Corthan colony worlds had petitioned their homeworld government for more autonomy, frustrated by rules and regulations that made no sense for frontier life. The Corthan military had been ready to enforce compliance by force. Then Counselor Thane had reached out to Cole personally. Captain Cole, Thane said over a secure communication channel, I find myself needing human advice. The colonies are not wrong to want more local control. Our government has become too centralized, too distant from the people it serves. But I cannot simply grant their demands without appearing weak to my political opponents. Cole leaned back in his command chair and thought for a moment. Counselor, with all due respect, who cares if you appear weak? Will those colonies be more productive with local governance? Almost certainly yes. Will they remain loyal to the Corthan government if you give them autonomy? They have stated that is their wish. They do not want independence, merely the freedom to manage their own affairs. Then give it to them, Cole said simply. Call it a modernization initiative. Say you are reforming government structures to better serve frontier populations. Turn what could be a rebellion into a triumph of progressive leadership. You get credit for being forward-thinking. The colonies get what they need and everyone wins. Thane was silent for several seconds. Your Admiral Morrison would say something similar, I think. Cole smiled. Probably with more colorful language, but yes. The thing about humans, Counselor, is that we have experienced thousands of years of political upheaval on Earth. Revolutions, civil wars, peaceful reforms, violent overthrows. We learned that holding on to power just for the sake of power usually makes things worse in the long run. Better to change on your terms than to have change forced on you later in a much messier way. The reforms passed. The Korthan colonies gained significant autonomy, and Thane became surprisingly popular among his own people for being willing to adapt to changing times. Back on the Retribution, Admiral Morrison was meeting with his senior staff when Sophie Green brought troubling news. "Sir, we are getting reports from the Outer Rim territories. The Dravik's hegemony has been expanding aggressively into unaligned space. They are displacing indigenous populations, taking resources, and basically acting like bullies." Morrison's jaw tightened. The Council's response? The usual. Strongly worded condemnations. Economic sanctions that do not really hurt them. Nothing with actual teeth. Kyle Banner spoke up. "Are we going to do something about it, Admiral?" Morrison stood and walked to the window overlooking Vrex Prime. "Get me a direct line to the Dravik's leadership. It is time they learned what it means to have humanity on the Security Council." 12 hours later, 3 human warships, including the UES Justice, arrived at the edge of Dravik's territory. The message transmitted to the Dravik's government was clear and simple. Stop the expansion immediately. Return displaced populations to their homeworlds. Enter into arbitration talks about the disputed territories, or face consequences. The Draviks, confident in their own military strength and convinced that humanity would not actually fight over some minor Outer Rim worlds, refused. It was a mistake they regretted quickly. The human ships did not invade Dravik space. They did not need to. Instead, they established a blockade around the contested territories. No Dravik ships could enter or leave. When the Dravik's fleet arrived to break the blockade, they discovered that human ships were faster, their weapons were more accurate, and their shields were nearly impossible to penetrate with Dravik's weapons technology. Not a single shot was fired. The Dravik's fleet simply could not get past the blockade. They tried for 3 days, attempting different tactics, but every time they were outmaneuvered and outperformed. Finally, they gave up and asked for talks. Within 2 weeks, the Draviks had agreed to return the displaced populations. Within a month, they had entered arbitration about future expansion. And surprisingly, they gained a reputation for being smart enough to back down from a fight they could not win. As months turned into a full year, the galaxy began to understand what humanity's presence truly meant. Humans were not conquerors looking to build an empire. They were not seeking to dominate other species. They were reformers and problem solvers who refused to accept that things had to stay the way they always had been, just because they always had been that way. Admira,